haven't done that in years. I'm surprised I can still do that. Oh god, does that hurt the cheeks?
And hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the MMOBuff podcast. What are we talking about today? Rewarding the gamer. And we have the usual suspects. It's Gazimoff and Pseudo.
Hi!
Hello there!
And that was nearly in danger of being timed with the background music. That's really quite scary. We can't be doing things like that. Pseudo, how are you this week?
Yes. I'm really, really good. I'm kind of looking forward to Eurogamer this weekend.
Gazimoff, same question.
I'm good. I'm also looking forward to Eurogamer this weekend. It's fast approaching, got the WildStar community thing. All kinds of good stuff is coming up soon.
And you seem to have something new in the microphone graveyard.
Yes, so regular listeners of the show will have struggled last week because this thing here was a bit faulty. It has now been temporarily replaced with this fine Logitech G930 headset, which will be filling in for a period of time until such time as a new condenser mic appears round about here-ish.
And with that being said, we mentioned briefly in the intro, we're going to be talking about rewarding the gamer. And what do we mean by this? Well, I'm going to elaborate for a split second. Oh, look at that. Steal the mic, steal the camera. It's all about understanding why we're playing the games we play. What do we actually find rewarding about it in the first place? Is it actually the act of, running around in circles and grabbing all of those stars or whatever it might be in the age-old Sonic games? Is it about meeting up with friends, socializing and taking down the big raid boss? Is it swinging the sword, or is it picking up the loot at the other end? And the answer is it's a number of those things. But hey, there'll be a little bit more to follow as time goes on. But before we do that, it's time for some news.
Okay, so there are 3 bits that I want to talk to you about this week. The first piece of news, which isn't a huge thing, but it's quite interesting, is World of Warplanes. They've decided to put back their release date until November. This is kind of interesting. They say that they want to put some final polish onto the game and tweak some bits and pieces here and there, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. It's great that they feel that they need to push it back. But also, there's been another game, War Thunder, which has been, to kind of phrase, stealing their thunder somewhat. It's been really kind of praised as an alternative to what Wargame is doing. And I think they've taken a look at that and thinking, well, we can do better, but we need a bit more time to do so. So I can understand why they've decided to do that. It's quite interesting because Wargaming typically had that entire kind of strategy, tactical, war, battle arena thing to themselves way back when, but now they're facing more and more competition on that front. And I think that over time they're probably going to find their little market starts to intensify. Next up, Warhammer Online is closing down, and it's going to be closing down in December. This is going to be a bit of sad news to people who've been playing the game. It's been running for about 5 years now, originally developed by Mythic Entertainment, now part of EA. They said that they're closing it down because they didn't want to renew terms with the license holder, which is Games Workshop. So you can kind of understand why they're deciding to make that decision anyway. It's also similar to what happened with Star Wars Galaxies, although with that you had Star Wars The Old Republic picking up afterwards. But again, it's disappointing to see that another franchise will be disappearing from our PCs soon. And then finally, and this is probably the biggest news, Steam have announced they're getting into the operating system market, or Valve has said they're going to get into the operating system market with Steam OS. This is very significant news for a number of different reasons. First of all, it means that rather than just producing a Steam box, which is what everyone was expecting to hear, they're saying, no, we're going to produce an operating system and you can put it on any machine, put that in your living room and away you go, which is fantastic. But the The second issue with it is that you're going to be able to basically wave two fingers at Microsoft and say, thank you, but we don't want any of your Windowsy stuff anymore. We're just going to go with this dedicated operating system to play games with. And there'll be much more to come out of that as we start to dig into it further once it comes out, which we're told is soon. I don't know if that's Valve time soon or not. But yes, it could be a significant development. And that's only the first of 3. Apparently they're making a new development in a couple of days' time, so we should bring that to you next week. But those are the 3 kind of big hitters. I would say, Mizpah, what do you think of all that?
Well, it's a couple of things. First thing is, it's always a shame to see an MMO go the way of the dodo. In the case of Warhammer 2, things really jump out at me. The first one is that a franchise that's dependent on an IP could actually be in a 5-year renewal cycle with a license holder. Now, it could well be it's a sensible contract, meaning that they had guaranteed renewal clauses and prices, stuff that wouldn't send them running for the hills. But there's a second spectre here that looms when I think about the actual proposition. What if the game were fantastically successful, producing loads of revenue? What if it actually had become the WoW killer that people at the time were looking for? Would they still have had a relicensing problem when someone can effectively hold them over a barrel? Now, I'm not saying Games Workshop guys would do that, but we're probably never going to find out. But it would be fascinating to know how that situation would have been handled if the game had run to the other extreme. But as to why it failed, candidly, it's probably a whole number of things, and that's a show all by itself. Other than that, yes, I agree, Valve, very interesting. We'll see what they do with that. It could have interesting implications for the publishing stream, getting games to market. There's already an awful lot of control in the hands of a few key players. Good thing, bad thing, all depends on what they do. You can't say they haven't revolutionized distribution to a certain level. But those are my thoughts. But let's get the thoughts of a pseudo, and then perhaps talk about a couple of competitions.
Well, to start off with, the concept of games closing, I remember when that started. I mean, at least in the more online genres, when you have games closing and things. And it always seemed to come as a shock to me at the start. Nowadays, I kind of look at it and I'm like, well, that's just one more knocked off the block. It's almost as if one could argue, although I don't agree with it, that the days of MMOs and online gaming are quote-unquote numbered and over. That's not actually the case. I think the case is more along the lines of we have so many things coming out now that people they're starting to find themselves torn between what they really want to play, and there's different play styles, there's different stories, there's different genres, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, and I think that impacts the games that are out there. And it can actually, I wouldn't necessarily say that a game is dying because players have decided, hey, this is not what I want to play. It's just now you're finding games that are competing against genres. You've got, like you were saying, we have a game coming out with warplanes and stuff that sort of fit into the same sort of niche, and you're now getting what is known as competition. Now, I would think in a market that is based on monopolies and money and everything else, when you start adding in more people, there's supposed to be a competition, and then you see the developers come up with new things. But that's really a topic for a whole nother show, because then you have to talk about what it really takes to bring a game into market, what you have to do to actually fundamentally change things. For example, Firefall cutting themselves out of esports entirely. So, there's a whole bunch of stuff to be discussed there. However, the concept of Valve getting themselves involved in an operating system kind of makes me a little excited but wary. Because a lot of games, or a lot of game players will tell you, I would love to do nothing but play on a Linux operating system. And while playing on a Linux operating system, I could, run Wine or something and actually try to get games that would work on Microsoft to work in that particular system. However, the reality is a lot of games are dependent upon things like DX thingy. What is it called? DirectX. DX.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's
and
kind of
I'm wondering if they're going to be on that or OpenGL or,
Well, that's kind of the point, because if you look at it, if you look at the entire gaming infrastructure that we have, you've got PlayStation 4, which uses OpenGL. you've got iPhone, iOS, and you've got Android, which uses OpenGL for embedded systems. You've got Mac, which uses OpenGL, and Linux, which uses OpenGL. So the only people using DirectX are Microsoft with Windows and with the Xbox. So you can use OpenGL on Windows. There's nothing to stop you. So it makes me think that Microsoft's only kind of claw, if you like, into gaming at the moment is DirectX and the fact they've got this hugely popular console infrastructure with something like 40 million consoles out there. People start turning away from DirectX in droves and saying, you know what, we can't be bothered with that kind of development pipeline anymore, and bifurcating our gaming engines and doing all the kind of licensing and stuff like that, we're just going to focus on OpenGL and that's it. Then there's much more opportunity there. But it still needs to be understood because you've got so many different variants of OpenGL. Will people still see a benefit from focusing purely on that particular technology?
Not just variants, but performance. We'd need to do a little research here to come back and be authoritative, but my top of my head understanding is the variation in performance across OpenGL compared to the way you can predict performance with DirectX gives a massive advantage when you're trying to distribute across multiple platforms and a range of hardware types.
Agreed.
Well, I can kind of speak on a little bit of experience because there was a time where I ran World of Warcraft on OpenGL, specifically on a wine distribution of Ubuntu. And in my personal opinion, I remember reading the forums and there was this huge frustration with, when are you guys going to allow OpenGL? When are you going to allow it on Windows? When are you going to do this? There was a huge debate about it. But I will tell you from personal experience, running it through OpenGL made the game quicker, graphically faster, less lag with all of the particle and physical things going on, and it was a joy to play. And the only reason I actually stopped running WoW, and this is way back in the day, obviously, because I've only just recently gotten back into it, and I'll go into that later. But to me, it was sort of like all of a sudden, there's other games I want to play, but wine doesn't cover everything.
Yes.
And it makes some games jumpy, laggy, or it creates other faults. And, going into developing a game, you have to pick what you want to design for. And how many companies out there sit there and go, I'm not even going to work on a Mac client. Sorry, guys, we're just going to focus on Windows. Or even in today's age, I'm only going to work on an Xbox. I'm not going to do PS or Wii, although that's kind of a whole nother conversation in itself. But, the development process starts with, I guess, really, what are you going to build for? And then you, like we were talking about with DirectX and stuff, you still have to get licensing to actually use that. Yeah. And, you've got the video card manufacturers who work with that stuff because...
Yeah. It's quite interesting. The DIST mentioned something in the chat room. OpenGL compatibility isn't the only issue, and you still need Linux drivers for a lot of hardware as well. Linux drivers are getting better, both NVIDIA and AMD to a certain extent.
ATI?
NVIDIA more, well, ATI as was, AMD now. They generally tend to produce good quality drivers now. The NVIDIA ones are actually getting pretty reasonable, but they've needed to do that because of the work they're putting into their Shield Android box. And again, Android is running on the same kind of platform. But I would say that from my own experience, the NVIDIA drivers weren't that bad. You had to get the proprietary ones. You couldn't just use the standard open source NVIDIA drivers because they weren't good enough, and the proprietary ones did have a bit of lag. They didn't have all the features that the Windows ones had, but they were still pretty good. I think that now that you've got Steam's weight behind it, and the fact that NVIDIA and AMD are both parties in the kind of OpenGL working group, I think we'll start to see that those Linux drivers improve, and that's been kind of Steam and Valve's major focus.
I would hope that does indeed become the case. One thing I will just say as a throw out, I'm in the process of early conversations with NVIDIA, actually looking at what happens when they go into partnership with a development studio. So if people are interested in this as a topic, and from the comments in the chat room it seems they are, we'll try and dig into this in a little more detail for another time. But there's another word I've seen in the chat room a few times, and that's competitions. Pseudo.
Oh, hi everybody, it's Pseudo, and I'm here with the competition breakdown. Okay, so first off, I'm going to pull out of the protective cover that I have for these cards. The EQ Next cards, signed by the executive producers of David Georgeson and Terry Michaels. Ooh.
Sorry, Tracy.
Sorry, Tracy. I only have 2. The other 2 were mailed out along with some stickers and a keychain. But yes, this is still here, and we will be giving these out in the show a little bit later. On top of that, we've also had, as everyone seems to know, Hearthstone beta keys. A couple of news on that front. We do have a winner selected. Wow, for some reason I can't remember words tonight.
Number 1,
we do have a
145.
Yes, we do have a winner selected from our Facebook Hearthstone beta key giveaway. However, as a side bonus for people who are going to watch Mizpah tomorrow night playing his Hearthstone stream, we have 3 more to give away randomly. So if you don't win tonight, and you haven't won last stream that he did, and you didn't win last Monday when we did some other stuff, you have another shot. That's right. 3 more beta keys are in our hands to give to you tomorrow night during Mizpah's stream. I highly recommend watching for a chance at that. Now, I still remind you, I still don't have a beta key, so you are the lucky ones. But besides that, we have something else coming up. Are we going to bring that up now, or are we going to wait?
Yes, let's.
Ooh, okay. Well, it seems that we are the gift that keeps giving. We have even more beta keys to give out for a completely different game, totally different genre. And in fact, anybody who we give beta keys to, I'm going to be really, really, really excited to hear your feedback on this game, because I've heard a lot of things about it, both good and bad. However, I want to hear your thoughts. To get involved in this, there is going to be another Facebook competition. The game that I am talking about is Guns the Duel 2. And we have quite a few beta keys to give away for that one. So pay attention, follow us on Facebook, MMOBuff, follow us on Twitter, MMOBuff, follow us all over the place, MMOBuff, and get yourself in to get a beta key for that. And bring your feedback back to us at voice@MMOBuff.TV. Let us know, because we are going to be talking with them at Eurogamer. We are going to be in communication with them. Actually, a little bit before then. Yeah, good point. And we'd love to know what questions you have for them or anything else like that. So you get your answers, not just us. Because, yeah, we're going to have lots of questions because we're curious and, yeah, we want to know. But
So
I'd love to actually have your questions as well.
So, Pseudo, do you want to give out the name of the winner?
I don't have the name of the winner. You do,
I do.
because it was the random player on your thingy, the random generator. I just got the number and I went, oh, let's put that on Twitter.
I'm now going to completely mispronounce this name. It is going to be, drumroll, Mert Tokel. If your name is Mert Tokel,
Woo-hoo.
Merttokel, congratulations. You've just won a Hearthstone EU beta key. But a few more chances tomorrow, another 3 in fact. And just quickly on the guns topic, Gunsy 2 the Duel, or the Duel 2 to give it its full title.
There you go.
Before we pass over to Gazimov, I'm in fact sitting down with Christian from Prosabian Sat to talk about the game, to talk about the design decisions, particularly the interesting backstory of the game. They're classing it as an MMO shooter. How much shooter lobby, how much MMO remains to be seen. And the game was actually based off a playstyle that developed due to glitches in the original game engine. To do with triggering an action and blocking the action to cancel the slow animation, but still actually doing the damage, and chaining these things together into something that became known as K-style or M-style. Had an interesting side effect in that the barrier to entry became so high in this game. If you couldn't perform these moves, you were basically dead, which gave it a huge, I'm contradicting myself by definition here, it gave itself a very, very dedicated but niche following. And now they've taken the core concepts and extended them out into the game that's currently in closed beta. So we'll be talking to people on Wednesday about that. Keep an eye on YouTube and the follow-up show, as well as an article and some few other bits and pieces on the channel. But all of this has been the aperitif before the main event. And the main event now comes up. And Gazimov, do you want to take the reins?
Okay, so Mizpa's come up with this interesting topic, which is that we want to discuss how players get rewarded in our favourite MMOs. Now, this can take a number of different areas. So you might be getting quest loot, quest rewards. You might be going around slaying monsters and getting loot from them. You might be going into dungeons or raids and getting loot from there. You might kill the epic dragon and get the legendary sword and stuff like that and be rewarded like that. That's one way of being rewarded for taking part in an MMO. You might be in it for the social side of things as well, so you might be there to play with friends. You might get more of a reward from helping your group out and putting on massive events. You might just feel that you get rewarded from contributing to the entire scene that makes up the favourite game that you currently play. So all of those things together make up some kind of reward that you as a player, or that we as players, get out of the games. The question is, what's the most important to us? Is it just a case of, okay, loot is important, loot is the overriding thing, and if you look at the changes that have happened in Diablo 3 recently, and the ones which are going to be happening with Loot 2.0, then yeah, loot's really important, and we only play it for the loot. But if you look at people who like doing things like guild leadership and stuff like that, then actually leading a bunch of 40 people to kill the epic monster is still very rewarding. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at today. What's more rewarding? So while you guys in the chat room come up with your particular thoughts about what you think is most important to you when you're playing games, I'm going to fire this over to Pseudo and see what she thinks.
Well, this is an interesting one to me because when you talk about rewards, there was a brilliant little piece done by Penny Arcade about intrinsic versus extrinsic. There's been papers written about intrinsic and extrinsic type of rewards, etc. However, I think what really stands out to me when it comes to rewards is you're not going to find two players who get the exact same rewards from a game or look for the exact same type of things from a game. It's going to be very, very difficult to nail down the best types of rewards to give to a player. However, I think even in today's direction, if you want to go after that, you know, plus 15 shoulders of, oh my gosh, I am awesome, and they sparkle, if you have 40 people being led by a raid leader or a guild leader trying to go after something like that, you're going to find yourself causing all kinds of problems if that person doesn't get their plus 15 shoulders because somebody else got them. And there can be rules in place for that, but that's a loot thing. There's also other types of rewards as well, and I think we have to make a distinction here. There is a huge distinction in games versus solo player games, single player games, and the rewards that you get from that, versus an online game that isn't necessarily an MMO at all. In fact, I'm drawing a line in the sand between online and MMO here. There's rewards that you can get within an online type of game, and then in the MMO genre, where the entire purpose behind it is you're surrounded by tons of people. Now, I have heard an argument come about recently saying, you know what? If you're playing a game just because your friends are playing it, you're playing it for the wrong reasons. I kind of agree and I kind of disagree because there are games that I have played because my friends have played it. May not have been the best game in the world to me. I might have thought the ragdoll effects were crappy or the story was horrible, but I was playing with my friends and it was a social outlet and it was fun to listen to their enjoyment level. However, not everybody is that selfish or selfless. Sorry.
Okay,
So,
let's take this one into round table mode a little bit here. So there we go. Three faces
We have
on
a
the
round
screen,
table?
so we can disagree with each other freely. So let's start with a definitive statement. In 50 words or less, Pseudo, what defines your enjoyment in a game in terms of priorities?
Ooh,
And yes,
okay.
that's tough.
I'm going to have to start this. I'm going to have to start this with, it depends on my mood. There are times where all I want to do is hit something really hard with a gigantic sword and watch it be destroyed and blood splatter all over the screen. There are times where I want to watch somebody else do that. There are times where I really, really like just running around in a world and learning about the story. There are times where I just want to run around and see what loot is available and what looks good and what doesn't look good and laugh at the really silly gimp gear that some people have to wear as they're leveling up in a game. So yeah, it depends.
And Gazimov, same question in your direction.
Okay, so like with Pseudo, it depends entirely on the type of game that I'm playing and the mood that I'm in. This is one of the reasons why I find MOBAs and other forms of battle arena and online game a little bit frustrating. So things like your League of Legends, your Dota 2s, your MechWarrior Online, stuff like that, because you only get awarded in currency and experience points. You don't get any kind of mech parts or anything like that. Or
well, if you kick someone's butt and win, doesn't that count as a reward as well?
To an extent, but I like the shinies. I like the shinies, and
you admit it.
Yeah, I like the shinies, and having to chase around things like, okay, I want to get the Arcade Sonya code because it looks awesome, and the Arcade Graves code and stuff like that, and it's really annoying because you're dependent on luck to outside of the game to do that. You can't just say, okay, I'll grind to get those. World of Warcraft and other games, World of Warcraft to me started off being a case of, okay, I'll play it because it's an adventure. You're going out exploring, and that's one of the main things for me, going out and investigating this huge world. But it also comes down to killing the dragons, getting the loot. And there's a fantastic game called Munchkin, which really aptly describes that, which is beating people up, getting the treasure, and stabbing other people in the back.
I appreciate the fact that it depends on our mood, but it all comes down to the violence factor.
So let's break it down a little more, and perhaps let's try some contrasting
I want your
actions in
answer.
different games. Well, you're actually going to build up to this.
Your answer.
Okay, if I summarise
Before
first,
we go, we'll see if you
summarise
change your mind as
first,
we
my
discuss.
personal enjoyment is to do with triggering an achievement that requires the coordinated activities of a group. For me to get rewarding loot, it has to come off the 40-man boss. It has to come off something that takes considerable effort, and I can stroke my virtual e-peen to say, hey, look, I'm wearing this. I did say virtual. I was very clear on that word. And it's all well and good running around by yourself and achieving something, but running around in a group and achieving something is so much more enjoyable. And my enjoyment comes in two strands, both the existence of the group and its ability to function, so I get rewarded at every step along the way, and then I get further personal enjoyment in the potential rewards of raiding. And that's why I play games. So let's break it down and go back to the beginning.
Yeah, I want to come in on that first point.
Go right ahead, Gazi.
You get satisfaction from going in with a group and doing something. That is fantastic when you're going in with an organized group and you're doing something as an organized team of people.
I don't do unorganized groups.
When you dive in as a puggy and try and do something like looking for dungeon or looking for raid, it's a case of how long can you tolerate the lolzols noob.
I
now see, I have to.
Surprised if I've run 20 pugs in 8 years.
Well, that's you. Some of us have actually done a heck of a lot more than that. And actually, this makes me wonder. You know, we have a day and age, at least within WoW, and even a lot of games that are coming out that are bringing in the MMO genre, the looking for group into just being built into the game naturally. Some could actually see that as a reward because you have the ability to, even if you are DPS, get into a dungeon solo. And we're talking about play styles here, impacting a lot of things. And I think playstyles impact the rewards that a game will develop, but at the same time, like I just said, you know, each one of us, it depends on our mood, it depends on what we're in the mood for. You know, I know that you really enjoy going in there, Miz, and beating the hell out of stuff with the guild, because that's your biggest sense of enjoyment. I mean, I think the ultimate feeling I have ever gotten from a game was that pragmatic pause right before I lost my eardrums because a boss went down for the first time. And my ears, just looking back, I'm getting chills down my spine because my ears hurt that bad. But it was that painful pleasure of finally we did it. And it was just, for me, it wasn't the fact that I accomplished it, it was the fact that everybody else around finally felt that amazing, just, oh yeah, kind of emotion. Now that's kind of in a social aspect. However, as we were discussing in previous episodes, what is it, like 60-70% of players in the Western world are solo players or tiny compact group players, which is why we're getting things like flex raids within World of Warcraft, and why I think even WildStar is catering to the 20 raid group and not just the 40 raid group.
Let's jump back, because I'm going to get to the points that you're going to. But to me, there's a journey, because there's a fascinating thing here about the group rewards, in that you've got to actually go down a long and winding path to actually get there in the first place. So let's start with the most basic concept. I am Warrior 1.0 in generic MMOA. And I have my shield, and I have my sword, and I'm standing in a big open field, and let's pick rats. There are 100 MMO rats, and I have a quest to go and kill 10 of them. So I walk up to a rat, I shield slam it, probably. I swing my sword at it, miss, wonder how on earth that happened, realise that I've got no plus hit gear on, proceed to kill 10 rats, go back to an NPC, and get given 10 gold. So here's my question. Is that in and of itself fun?
It depends.
It depends.
Entirely.
It depends entirely. Okay, I'm going to jump in this time first. For me, it depends entirely because there's a couple of things that can come from that. You can walk over with your glorious shield and you can shield bash it, and if that rat happens to go flying 60 yards away from you because of the force of your slam and has some kind of weird ragdoll, in case you can't tell, I really like ragdoll things, but has some kind of weird little effect and it starts to squirm and does crazy little things, that in itself can be really enjoyable.
What about
However, there are also people
700th time it does that?
However, that's what I was just about to get to. However, there are some people, I am not one of them, but there are some people who really, really enjoy the concept of throwing on some music, chatting with their friends, and doing nothing but grinding the same mob over and over and over. And it's a sense of enjoyment for them. Not me, mind you. Don't think I'm that way, because I'll get bored really quick. No. In this case, it's someone else does have that kind of opinion, and I know them, and I still don't get why they like that. But it depends.
Okay, so there's two things. There's, first of all, is there a chance that one of the rats will have accidentally swallowed an enchanted sword, and you want that off them? That's a fantastic thing to discover. You go, I've killed the rat, and hey, look, shiny sword.
How did it fit in there?
How did
it's always one of my favorites.
It's
thing, tiny little body.
I swear, I want to see the MMO where you've got this tiny little rat that's stretched over this huge shield, and it's kind of walking around on four little legs going.
In a similar vein, where are the rats that only have no ears and no tail, so that when you kill them, there is no tail?
That's very true. So there's another element, though, to it, which is partly what Suna was talking about, where if you want to give yourself more of a challenge, this is one of the kind of drawbacks with the kind of questing environment where you have quests that are pegged at a particular level. If you want to increase the challenge difficulty, then the most common way of doing that is, particularly as a caster of some class, is to gather mobs up, see how many you can handle, and then AoE them down. It makes it more efficient in terms of grinding for loot, but it also means that you can actually test yourself more than if you're just going around going rat, bash, rat, bash, rat, bash. I think that's something that a lot of people tend to miss, because you tend to find that quests particularly say you need to be a certain level to actually get to them, so you can't make the game more difficult for you. So I think that is a particular issue. I think that having interesting combat that's different from what we've experienced before, So moving away from the old tab targeting hotkey style combat to something that's a bit more active and involved makes it more interesting as well. And I'm really glad to see that both WildStar and Guild Wars 2 have taken that up. But just on the kind of topic of kind of organized group combat, during the weekend I was playing Guild Wars 2. And in Guild Wars 2 there's an event going on at the moment which is about this kind of demonic serpent fish dragon thing called Tequatl, which rises up. I don't know where they came up with this. But
I could give you some hints, but that's just great. And did you call it duckwaddle?
Well, no. I called it Tequatro Formaggio, the undead pizza. So you had this thing there,
Wow.
And as a server, you would try and take this thing down as a server. So you're talking about 300 people in one zone trying to take this dragon down as a group event. And we were failing and failing and failing. And so someone piped up, well, we do have a server mumble, or a realm mumble server that we can all leap on. So we all leapt on this thing, didn't know anyone else, started communicating and coordinating, and we took the dragon down.
Yay.
And it was this
Organized group.
Advanced social competitive gameplay.
It was like this hybrid pug thing that just formed and defeated this dragon, and it was brilliant. The fact that we'd been there for 10 hours and failing because it only spawns once an hour. It was like, but yeah, we killed the dragon eventually. But that was an achievement.
Well, to be fair, though, it was something set up by the developers to be in a server realm or server-wide event. It's not like the, say, random dragon pop-ups that are meant to be 40-man dragons back in the old days of Vanilla WoW and things like that, like Yggdrasil, Yashara, whatever her name was, in the Emerald area. But, you know, you're talking then about a coordinated group effort, and was the enjoyment the fact that you were with a whole bunch of other people, or was it the fact that you killed it, or was it the fact that it dropped loot? Where did you really get your... So you didn't care at all about anybody else who you were with. It was did you get loot? Did everybody get loot, or was it just one person?
Everyone got loot.
Everyone got loot.
Everyone got loot.
That's a different
but
scenario.
I got loot, and that was the important thing.
Huge RNG though, I believe, on the chest. So you could just get some, I think it's karma, and some artwork, but you could also get the ascended items.
There's a small chance of getting ascended items, but most people were in it not for the ascended gear, but for the snazzy cosmetics that you can also get from either achievements or from the item store. So things like your character can have a little pair of dragon wings if you really want that kind of thing, or you can have a little mini Tequatl that flies around next to you, stuff like that.
Well, see, I'm going to go back to something you said.
Stats?
Well, I'm going to go back to something you said. You mentioned the fact that, you know, in the case of the killing the rat as produced by you, Mizpah, you know, if you have the situation where it swallowed the sword, or you have some kind of active gameplay mechanic to it, like dodge, sprint, double jump, you know, the various things that are coming into MMOs nowadays, I think there's something to also be said for the mindless, non-active style of combat as well. This is going to sound very odd, but going back into WoW, I forgot how much fun it could be to stand there and do nothing but hit the same button repeatedly, because I only have one ability. So I was just sitting there and I'm like, I could actually focus on the things that were being said to me by friends because we were working on our UIs. I was like, I can actually hear what you're saying. I don't have to spend so much time going, oh my God, holy cow, I can't actually tell you that I'm moving out of this thing right now because, oh my gosh, if I do that, I can't actually catch it in time. And, you know, it actually limited my ability to have the social interaction, which was kind of the point at that moment in time. So there is something to be said for the non-active style of fighting. As a reward, it just depends, again, on your move.
Okay.
So back to you, Miz.
So let's take this concept and elaborate. And what I'd like to do here is to go in steps from early game through to mid game through to late game, and also look sideways at a couple of different games. What are the fundamental differences? So the most basic premise you have is take your character, control it, and kill stuff. You have the act of killing, the act of combat. You have the potential for reward, you have the random lottery effect, the thing that drives this small place called Vegas, the chance of improving. You also have the benefit of the actual improvement. I derive huge satisfaction out of seeing my virtual scorecard of stats and numbers go up as a character progresses. And I'll jump through far too many hoops to achieve that. It's one of my personal satisfactions. As you take that on, you can throw more and more things into the mix. So as you start to level, your character can become more complex. You start to look at the possibilities of, can I do this better? Can I be more efficient? You look at the challenge concept that you just introduced with the AoE. How does that scaling occur in differing games, in your opinion? And how important is that scaling of complexity to actually make the actions fun as opposed to monotonous?
Okay, so there's two things. The first thing is talking about mastery of skills. And mastery of skills, to a certain extent, is something that drives us forward. And my headset is slipping down the back of my head.
The mic is the problem.
Yeah. So if you've got a game where you've got a limited action set and you want to say, okay, what's the most efficient way of killing a single target using this set of 10 abilities, then you'll probably end up saying, okay, well, I want these 5 abilities here, which are better for me, and you want these kind of 5 support skills over here. And that's how Guild Wars 2 works. Then you pick the weapon you want around it, and you kind of build up a setup around that. And that's a fantastic way of kind of building up your own particular playstyle. But it also means that you don't have the issue that Pseudo was saying, where you've got 50 million skills on your screen and only 5 particular buttons are actually useful at any one time. Which is,
well, to be fair, that's one of the things that WoW did.
Yeah, exactly.
WoW
And
dramatically modified their style of your skill sets, and they did it in such a manner where you were basically said you have all these skills, but you don't have anywhere near the skills that you used to have, and they're only available in either certain stances or certain specs or what have you, and yet there was a huge uproar over the fact that it was being dumbed down.
Well, it was okay. So I played a mage in WoW, and I went from playing fire to frost, back to fire, and then over to arcane when arcane started trancing everything, and you ended up with 3 buttons that you would use all the time in your arcane mage
macro
rotation.
Because you wanted to include your trinkets and everything else.
So you'd end up with 3 buttons that you'd do in your kind of during your encounter, and then you'd have kind of 30 kind of situational things. I might be slightly exaggerating, but you'd have
not if you're a druid.
of situational stuff to fire off, and I think that is really naff design. I would rather have a setup where you say, okay, I want that ability, that ability, that ability, that ability, that ability, drop them into a setup like with Guild Wars 2, and then say, okay, that means then I can do this, that, and the other. You might have a thing in which allows you to just swap weapons and change your skills, but effectively you tailor your action set to suit your playstyle, and then you say, okay, I will stick with that action set during that encounter. And I think that creates more of a theory crafting kind of thing. I think that getting new skills are useful, but I think that far too often people place a kind of, oh, if I get to this next level, then I get this skill. And I think that trying to get people to push up levels to get skills is the wrong motivator. I think people should progress through the game to say, okay, I get to visit this cool area, I get to do these cool things, I get to go into this dungeon and defeat this particular boss. I think that's much
But
more
you're a
powerful.
loot lover, and what if your loot requires you to have a certain level? Don't you want to push up to get your hands on the loot? Not necessarily the ability, but the loot?
Exactly. I don't think that abilities should be used as a motivator and a reward for reaching a particular level. I think that, hey, you completed this quest, you get this loot. I think, hey, you can now go into this dungeon and get this loot. I think,
Now, see,
hey,
that's
you've reached
what,
level 30.
how are you supposed to do any kind of character development in any way, shape, or form if you don't have some kind of gate for either skill sets or abilities or something? I mean, how would you do character development in a game where you didn't have something like that?
And let's throw into that actually staging character graduation along the way. So there is actually a learning experience, because I would suggest that introducing skills in a tiered fashion, and by the way, I am the person that loves to have a palette of 40 skills, actually be able to have all of them on hand, and just practice till I know how to situationally use every single one of them, but that's just me. How would you handle that?
So I think that having this as your joypad and having to memorize every single button on it and what that button does is bad design, personally. I think that that is a fundamental flaw of building games for PC. I think it is much more satisfying to try and build a very tight experience around a skill set that can be customized and tailored to that particular player. And this is something that games like Guild Wars 2 do very well. So I think that having all those commands on tap is a bad idea, and I think that that's a kind of fallback to, well, just throw skills out there like candy, rather than making them all meaningful. I mean,
let me jump in there.
No, let me finish.
Okay.
You asked me a question, and I will finish. So, what I am saying is that you still need kind of skill progression as you move on, because there's this thing about skill mastery, and people want to learn as they progress, and it's part of what makes a game fun for us. Should it be there because it makes it fun, or should it be there as a reward? Those are two different questions. I think loot is a reward. I think skills are what makes the game fun and interesting in terms of, I have that skill, then does that skill incorporate, does it fit well with my kind of skill set and stuff like that? But they are two different focuses. Fun and complexity versus reward and kind of...
But some people see fun and complexity as a reward.
Yeah, some people do. I don't. I think that they...
Okay, so in this particular case, we disagree with each other, which is bound to happen sooner or later.
I would say that having a high skill bar, having an intrinsic level of complexity, and being able to master that complexity to the point where you're able to say, hey, I'm really good at this, or not, as the case may be, is in itself a strong reward and motivator. If I go back to my old-time WoW hunter, and I remember occasions where in Raid, at points you had to handle pulling, traps, DPS, target marking, disengages, misdirects, tranking, a host of situational abilities, plus DPS, plus in my case running a raid, and it actually was the level of complexity and multitasking that delivered the fun.
Right. I'm going to come back to you on that one. And this is a kind of bold statement. So, I think that if you compare two games, World of Warcraft and League of Legends, World of Warcraft, you have large action set. League of Legends, you have very limited action set. Hang on a minute. I think there is more skill in playing League of Legends at the high end than there is in playing Warcraft PvP Arena.
Okay, first off, I'm going to throw out there that you really cannot compare the two because one's a subscription and one's a pay-to-win model. So you're going to have to forgive me if my very first immediate reaction to that is apples and uranium. Great comparison there. However, I will state, I think it depends. Because you can have a limited action set. Even in WoW, you can challenge yourself to have a 5-button limited action set that's supposed to get you out of jail all the time, which is never really a possibility, but you can do so, and that can be part of the fun. However, I think before I go any further, I want you both to answer a question for me. Is fun supposed to be a reward? Can we even classify the two under the same category? Because what Gazzy's trying to do is separate fun from rewards. And what I'm trying to figure out is if that's even possible.
Okay. I think it depends entirely on the type of game that you're playing and so
Damn, it depends.
Okay, so let me put it this way. Reading a book is fun and entertaining. It's not rewarding, but it's fun and entertaining. Watching a movie, fun and entertaining, not particularly rewarding. Playing through a game, where like an RPG, fun and entertaining, not necessarily rewarding. with an MMO, and in fact with online games, they're kind of unique in that you get the kind of fun and entertaining, you get the kind of role play aspects, you get the storytelling aspect, you get the RPG aspects, you get the lore aspects, you get all of those things, the exploration, all the paths and stuff like that. They are all kind of fun, entertaining, tailored content for you. Not necessarily kind of snacky loot, shiny sword kind of thing, which is what I see as rewarding. The problem that you get is that you can spend all your time doing fun and entertaining stuff and never actually progress with rewards. So you might be having a whale of a time, but you might still be wearing crap gear, and that's, I think, the fundamental difference. So
I think you and I are going to have quite a few disagreements in this, because I firmly believe that reading a book can be rewarding. I firmly believe watching something on television or watching a movie can be rewarding. So even before you even get into your explanation, I'm sitting there going, this is not the way it should go. So basically what I'm going to say is, let us be quiet, because the Mizpah has been suspiciously quiet, and I want to see where he falls, and I have a feeling he's going to fall smack dab in between us.
Right, let me just find a fence, install it, and then I'll be able to sit on it.
How did I guess?
No, actually, I'm not quite going to actually sit on that tangent. I actually believe it's perfectly okay to put some modes of fun or types of fun and to make them available as rewards. I'm perfectly okay with some content being available to a number of people that complete certain challenges, whether that challenge is a select group or not. But the concept of something gated, and the reward is you get to do X. Now, in the example of, say, the X, and I'm going to get my names wrong here and look to the channel for assistance, in the Siege of Orgrimmar, and the epic cloak that you need in order to take on and teleport to the new raid boss, you have to go through a long, long list of achievements and be in a select group to get to the gated content that is potentially the highlight of fun for a raider. It's the epitome in the current content cycle, or one of. And I'm sure someone can supply the name, because I'm not currently raiding in WoW, so I can't come up with it. But that to me is fine. There's many, many dimensions here. Does fun have to relate to reward? No. Can it be a process? Yes. Can fun be derived as a result? Absolutely yes. But let's just steer the topic away from something for a moment and try another comparison. So I'm in Guild Wars 2, and I'm running around at a mid-level, and I am running around in group quest, going to the hearts, doing my stuff with the group, running around. And I have to say, as a leveling perspective, it wasn't, at the time I was doing it, pushing all my buttons from a fun perspective. There wasn't quite enough structure or focus. I didn't feel there was enough complexity available for me to really try and get into the mechanics of my character and optimize it. So it's simple mechanics, not necessarily a great deal of fun for me at that stage. Now let's flip to Hearthstone. It's another online game. And the basic mechanics are incredibly simple. Watch your mana available to you go up turn by turn. Take a card off the top of the deck. Look at the cards in your hand. Play a card. Trigger the effects. And pass the turn over to the other person. Simple, simple, simple. Yet, the reason there are hordes of people clamoring for beta keys for the game is it is innately fun. The act of playing every single card down on the board is fun. And here I'm contradicting myself. I'm taking this simple, on the surface, simple mechanic and going, I'm having fun in the act of doing, not just in the act of winning.
I throw back to what Ghazi said, I think, in one of the very first episodes we have. Fun can be equated to, it's new. And if you want to go that route, we can almost, and this is where, you could say that I'm being slightly hypocritical at the same time, but I think there's a very big distinction between something coming out and being brand new and, ooh, shiny, like gear tends to be when it drops, loot, ooh, it's new, it's shiny. But part of the fun process is if something is new and exciting. However, a game coming out to be played is supposed to be about fun. At the bottom line, if you're not having fun, and if your fun is derived from hanging out with people while you're playing, if your fun is derived from getting loot, if your fun is derived from killing the same rat that's walking around all flat like a platypus, if whatever you derive your fun from, that I think is always going to, in the end, be your reward. And I think that if a game or a game developer sits there and goes, okay, here's the deal. We want to gather as much of the market as we possibly can, because that tends to be what the game developers want, because that means money. And money means paychecks. Paychecks mean family is fed. Yay. Now, there is an awful lot of talk about how game developers can sit there and try to psychologically bring people in through reward systems of various type. For example, Lore Master in WoW, or killing all the hearts in Guild Wars 2, clearing off all the maps, finding all the hidden places, exploring someplace new, etc. There are different things that game developers bring to the table, and they're tailored to certain styles of fun. Look at WildStar. WildStar understands that you're not going to have the same game player sit there and go, oh, I want to kill the same mobs 70,000 times. Hello, warrior. Oh, I really want to go see what's over there. Hello, explorer. Oh, I wonder what this is about. Hello, scientist. They're giving you paths to go with things. Now, they're bringing psychology into their game development. But what they're looking at trying to tap into is not necessarily a reward system, but what is fun for the player. Yeah, and I think that is interesting. However, I think that a lot of people take that for granted.
So there are two elements there.
I always have two elements from you. It's great.
So if you look at a lot of MMO stuff, then you're talking about, okay, how do we make sure people are having fun? Not necessarily how do we make sure people are rewarded, how do we make sure people are having fun? What new skills can they learn? And what can they discover about the game? What interesting lore can they hear about and learn about? What kind of fascinating places can they discover? All those kind of things. That's slightly different from how do we make sure we're throwing loot at people on a regular basis. And they are two, yeah, exactly. And they're two different motivators. Some people get motivated, and this is the thing. You talk about. I wouldn't say that having fun and rewarding are particularly tied systems. I think that it's better to say, okay, how do we give people a motivation, a reason to stay in this big world? And I think that some people need rewards, and some people like to be fed with shinies on a regular basis. It's part of their 5 a day. And I think some people need to have the social aspect. I think some people need to do discovery. I think that all of those elements, and this is why you get path systems and stuff like that, which is one of the reasons why I really, really like what WildStar are promising us. Okay. But I think that they are all different motivators. Rewards, not so much.
So, Gazimov, the clock is ticking on this one. We've bounced around some ideas that we consider to be fun and drawn some comparisons. But we're now all sitting in front of Mr. Hyper-Mythical Game Developer III. And they're about to spend $1 trillion developing the world's best MMO. The downside is the management committee have only got 30 seconds to listen to one person define what fun should be in a game before they go off and build said game. So I think from all of us, we'll probably wrap up this segment of the show and then bounce back to do some EQ winners. With this quick pitch, you get to choose who goes first, Gazimov, but there is 30 seconds to pitch fun to... 30 seconds to pitch fun to Mr. Mystic Game Developer III, the wealthy trillionaire.
Okay, so I would say that fun with regards to an online game needs to be a number of different things. You need to think wide, in terms of providing different aspects of fun for different groups of people. You need to also find a way for those different groups of people to play together. That's the hardest challenge that MMOs have yet to grasp. Some of them have managed to come close, but I think if you want to try and build an MMO that will last for generations, then you need to work out what fun is for a large variety of people, and then a reason to bring them all together into a particular game world.
And Pseudo.
If you've figured out your target market audience, more or less, if you're picking between an online game, an MMO game, or a single-player game, the bottom line is fun is multi-layered. I completely agree with Gazzy in this. You must be able to break things apart, break up time played, because as we know, everyone running around without having to, say, empty their bags into town can get really monotonous. If you're looking to make a grinder, call it a grinder so that people don't walk in blind. Don't lie to your people. If, however, you're looking at doing a whole bunch of different things and you want to target as many people as possible, understand that some people are not going to be interested in everything that you bring forward, but whatever you do create, make it quality. Don't do it lackluster and don't do it second best. Do it to the best of your ability, even if you're only doing 3 specific things like PvP, gear grinds, and leveling. Do it to the quality and caliber that should be there. Because in the end, if you don't do that, no one's going to have fun.
And I'm not going to get away at this moment in time without at least attempting to answer the self-same challenge myself. So the first one to say is this: if anybody could define fun, put it into a formulaic equation or a potion and bottle it, and then offer that out on the open market, they'd probably be watching this show from a 60-foot Sunseeker yacht, because it is the secret in the industry that people are still searching for and striving for. So let's give it my stab, my pitch at the yacht. Well, the first problem is it's not formulaic. Different people derive fun in different ways, as we've already discovered. But there are a few things I think that are always needed to generate fun. Human beings, whilst both social, are also competitive. If anyone's going to be competitive, there needs to be a means and a mechanism to keep score. This could be in comparison to others. This could simply be in terms of personal comparison and measuring progression yourself. We see it in the stats on gear. We see it in the rankings in a StarCraft league. We see it in the comparison simply on level at the most simple point. So there needs to be a way to actually track progress and keep score. For those that are more competitive, there actually needs to be a way to challenge yourself, be that in character design and complexity, having those 40 buttons, or having the 9 buttons but a really high skill bar. So you want to be able to say, I can do this better than Fred, or actually, I'm not as good as Fred, I need to go and practice harder. And that will look after one segment of your population. But we're not just competitive, we're also social. And I actually firmly believe that human beings are social when put in the right environment. And often the anonymity of an online environment changes people's default social reactions, but that's a whole nother topic. But present the right environment calls there to be a reason for people to group up and progress together with the right tools. And I think that can help to build that long-term engagement. Finally, whatever your systems are, from mailboxes to transportation to complex distribution of stats, make them polished. For every single system, flesh out every single little nuance. It doesn't matter.
I'm cutting in! No! You do not get more time than we do. No! Absolutely
and the final
not.
thing would have solved
Hell
the
no.
problem for all time, but sadly I just don't get to put it forwards.
No, absolutely not. That is unfair.
And that brings us to our conclusion of rewarding the gamer. But we have another reward.
We do. Actually, we have 2 potential rewards, but they're going to have to. We're going to have to be cautious because we understand from watching the chat and everything that there's been some chat issues. So for everybody who's currently listening, can you take a moment and actually pause whatever it is you're doing, because you might just be listening instead of watching or what have you. Take a moment, alt-tab out of your game, run back to the computer, go back to your phone, whatever, and actually type something inside the chat, because there are 2 people here currently who have the potential to win one of the EQ cards, or EQ Next cards, that are signed by the executive producers. But if they don't actually state they're here, I can't give it to them. So if you get a moment, just run back. And then Mizpah is going to be giving away the Hearthstone beta key. Oh, no, you already gave that
I've
away.
already done that. 3 more
You've
tomorrow.
already given that away. Yes, and 3 more tomorrow's stream. Yes, yes, yes. So, yes.
Now, we should check the chat is behaving, because we're still seeing no responses.
Exactly.
So could everybody say hi in the chat? Let's see who's alive out there, if anyone.
Even I'll do it. Hi.
And there does seem to be a very long delay on chat at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does. Which makes it very difficult for me to give these things out, because it might be completely unfair. But there's 2 inside the chat right now that I could just go, you win. But
well,
I want to make certain they're listening.
if we know those people are there and we're being beset by technical difficulties...
We are. I'm now being told I'm
shall
disconnected from the chat.
Shall we make the executive decision to award? I think that's
I
reasonable
think we
in
should,
the circumstances.
because we specifically said that they had to be in the chat room, which they are. Just because Twitch is having problems with the chat room doesn't mean we should punish them. So, would you like to know who the 2 winners are of the last 2 EQ Next cards?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have. Don't lose it.
How do you spell that
when
again?
I moved to. Woo! Well, that was actually just saying it instead of actually spelling it. Okay. We have Oskask, who wanted to ask, who wanted us to actually go find a missing producer and see what they're up to, which
He's
is
not
awesome.
under the desk. I've looked.
And we also have Zambu123, who wanted to know more about our opinions on soundtracks. And it's interesting that that was actually brought up because of something you pointed out to me today that was utterly compelling and had absolutely nothing to do with the gameplay footage or the video or anything. And
wasn't
I was
it
just
awesome?
like, wow. I was totally blown away. I was like, whoa.
In fact, we should probably give some credit for that, because it really was that good, and allow people to find it for themselves.
Absolutely. Before we go that way, just so that you know, Oskask, which is OSCASSK, I will be emailing you after the show to get your information to mail to you. And Zambu123, I'll be getting your email as well so that I can get these things off to you. But you 2 got the last 2 EQNX cards. Thank you for your patience and the difficulties with the chat and everything. I understand it's incredibly frustrating. No control over it, sadly. But there you go. So yes, I have finally given away all 4 of the signed EQ Next cards. Yeah, that's it.
And that's probably the point in time that we do an official wrap.
Do we want to kind of say for the producers and stuff, pace?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Gazi. Go ahead. Pace. Oh, come on.
Oh.
Sad face.